we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. I'm your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, please reach out to us if you ever want to hear about a new episode, or if you had an idea for something or wanted to let us know about anything. I'm always here to listen. And if you ever wanted to tell your friends, that would help us so much. You can support the podcast or a Patreon, but telling a friend is just as much support. If you tell one friend overnight, we'll double the podcast. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for spending your time with me tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you, or tomorrow, or whenever you might be listening. Please excuse my slightly froggy voice here. I'm getting over a bit of a flu that took me out bad. It sounds like a few people at work got it, so excuse me if you hear some guttural noises, so to speak. But thank you for enduring this with me. It's a pretty heavy episode. I mean, of course, I leave a heavy one for when I'm already feeling shitty, but I think it kind of meets some of the criteria. We're gonna be talking about the Gulag Archipelago today, written by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. He was actually a prisoner in the Gulag. So during this time between 1918 and 1958, 1918 and 1956, the USSR, the Soviet Union, which became ever stronger kind of after World War I, and they were kind of amalgamating and creating more and more footholds in kind of all the smaller neighboring countries that surrounded Russia. They kind of annexed a lot of them kind of by force, and then Vladimir Lenin, V.I. Lenin, not I Am the Walrus, but V.I. Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. He was a Marxist, so he created a communist state, which essentially, at least by the only actual evidence we have of a country being fully communist, which is the USSR or Russia at the time, it's truly the only evidence that the shit doesn't work in reality. Now that can be a little bit difficult for, shall we call them, fans of Marxism and communism and socialism. I mean, socialism and communism are interesting. I mean, I live in Canada. For everyone listening who knows that, for anyone listening who doesn't, we have a lot of socialist programs. Our healthcare is socialist, taxes is kind of a socialist idea a little bit, I guess. But you can't really be a communist without being a socialist, but just because you're a socialist doesn't mean you're a communist. So that's where things get always super dicey with all this, because people are thinking, well, the socialism thing kind of works. Like, you can look at the Scandinavian countries, you can look at the UK. Again, a lot of parts of their government is socialist in that sense. But that doesn't mean that the next step, which again is communism and the idea of to each their own, everyone for their means, whatever all that shit is, it's basically just like, we're going to just cut the pie up in however, if there's 8 million people in the country, let's say, we're cutting that pie into 8 million slices. It doesn't matter if you're a fucking doctor, lawyer, someone running the country, or some guy who fucking sits on his couch and eats chips. We're all in this together. We should all spread that wealth evenly. But it seems, at least again, in practice, the only true example, it seems in practice, once you give at least a few people the power, because you inevitably need someone kind of leading all this, because eventually people are going to start to rail against what they want to give up. And if you have to be the leader that says, hey, no, this is how we're doing it. We're going to do it this way. We're going to change things up a little bit. Sometimes you have to do that by force. And it takes a dictator, essentially. It takes someone who's going to call the shots without a lot of reasoning and logic behind it. It's just whatever is good for the body politic, for the greater good. You're going to have a lot of their subordinates kind of see through the cracks and realize, hey, I have a lot of power in here because of the status that I hold within this government. And I have X amount of people above me. I have X amount of people below me. As long as I keep those people above me happy, I can fucking shit on anyone below me, steal funds, do whatever, because everything is, you're the ones that are kind of splitting it up, right? Like if you're the ones that are this giant funnel that's taking in all the potatoes that the country grows. Ukraine is the USSR's breadbasket. All the wheat that the Ukraine grows. You're the one that's taking all that in and then shuffling it out. It's so easy for you to just go one for me, one for you, one for me, and then you're just pocketing. It's like human nature is going to come into play for sure, but it's just so fucking easy. There's just such a tiny fucking little turn. All it takes is you just lose that sense of conscience for a second, whatever, just realize the whole system's rigged. You're getting shit on from top down, so you might as well just get yours and fuck everybody else. And that's what tends to happen. I mean, my grandmother was born, we're not 100% sure, but 1919, 1921, somewhere in between that area. So in Lithuania, which is one of the Baltic states that was annexed by Russia. So she basically grew up in this, I mean, again, it was a Baltic state, so there was a little bit of separation, but not really. I mean, those were the countries that were really taken advantage of, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Poland, Poland was able to stay out of it mostly, but a big part of Poland that is now Poland was all involved in that too, right? So again, these countries got hit really bad. So my grandmother got the fuck out of there in the 40s. During World War II, but she still had lived quite a long time, like a lot of her life, man. Like she was in her 20s. She lived a lot of her life under this USSR Gulag fucking rule. Now, the Gulag Archipelago, it opens really interestingly. It kind of talks about where these it's very like future, like there's a theater to the writing, which I think is beautiful, and I think it is somewhat of a foray into Russian writing itself, which is really cool, which I don't really know too much about. I haven't read like Dostoevsky or like Crime and Punishment and like all that shit. Like I haven't read that at all because that's hella daunting, but I'm excited to look into it because I think this was just kind of this being nonfiction, of course, I think it was just a little bit of a taste of how the Russians view literature, and creates this amazing first scene in the novel or in the book, I should say, where it's these Arctic explorers, and they find this archipelago like frozen under the ice. They find this like frozen river under the ice, and this is in the area where the Gulag was, and they find these fish and these salamander that are frozen in the ice, have been frozen there for thousands of years, and they fucking jump in and just start fucking eating it, which was like, when I first started reading that, I was like, almost like, is this a little bit grotesque? Like, this is a really interesting opening scene, but at the same time, such a really interesting device that Solzhenitsyn uses to kind of set this like, oh wow, it's this land of discovery, but yet there's this there's animalistic human element that will always exist, that will always, no matter what, like, as much as we can see the beauty in something or marvel in the fact that, we've discovered this frozen river over thousands of years, we still need to fucking eat something, and we'll just munch, and like, there's something really interesting, and I might be interpreting that wrong, but I just thought, I was just remember reading it, and I mean, listen to it in an audiobook. I remember hearing the words going like, this is fucking heavy duty. Like, what is this going to be? And anyway, it's practically a first-hand account. I mean, like I mentioned, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn did spend 8 years in the Gulag, which is actually, so the Gulag is like in Siberia. So northern Russia area. And it stands for, its Gulag is actually an acronym for the Soviet bureaucratic institution Glavnoy Upravlenie Ispravitel Trudnikovich Lagreri, which, excuse my Russian accent, I probably don't have one at all. That's a little bit Lithuanian, maybe came through there, but in English it stands for main administration of corrective labor camps. And they're all like forced labor camps. Like I'm talking like you're going out and you're working, you're fucking hauling logs, you're fucking building shit, you're breaking rocks. Like you're all over the fucking show, just working to death, basically. Like they're going to work you to death. And my family actually did have a connection with that. I mean, again, being in Lithuania, my grandfather was alive at the time too. And his, like, the biggest thing with this time period in the USSR is it was such a culture based on fear. And it was a fear that was disseminated by the state, by the USSR, by the government. It was a fear that was disseminated to be afraid of your neighbor, that they're going to come in the middle of the night. The state's going to come in the middle of the night. They're going to fucking grab you. The KBH or whatever the fuck they were called. Precursor to the, whatever the, what's the current Russian, anyway, what is it? Sorry, I got to look this up. Spy. The SVR? KGB. That was the KGB. That was what I was thinking of. But the Gulag. Yeah, the KHB, I think. Anyway, I'm so sorry, everyone. Bear with me. I'm fucking sick as fuck. But again, this idea of this fear that anyone can come in the middle of the night, they're going to take you away from your home, away from your family. You have no idea necessarily why, and they're going to interrogate you. It all started with the arrest and the interrogation, and there was this whole system that went down, and they would just torture you. They keep you up. One of the biggest forms of torture that the Russians would do is keep you up at night. They wouldn't let you sleep. They would deprive you of sleep. And that is one of the worst forms of torture, because you're just like, you just want to go to fucking bed. You're going to say whatever you want. And that's the thing, is that a lot of these confessions or this information that they got from a lot of people were false. And it was just out of desperation and just out of this desperate plea to just let them fucking go to sleep or stop torturing them or stop whatever the fuck they were doing. I mean, truthfully, honestly, I can't even start to actually tell you what Solzhenitsyn goes through in this book and talks about and mentions about all the different forms of torture, all the different forms of interrogation. And then once that was done, they would just throw, they used to call them tenors, court 25ers. They'd say 10 years in forced labor, 25 years in forced labor camp. Like, if you've ever read The Tattooist of Auschwitz, I'm pretty sure I did a podcast episode on it, but go check it out. There's a sequel to that book called Silka's Journey, and Silka was actually a prisoner of Auschwitz. She was in the camp. She was taken there, but she was a concubine of the Nazi officers there. So she slept with them, and when the Russians liberated Auschwitz, they tried her as a war criminal because she was sleeping with the enemy. And she got sentenced to 10 years in the Gulag, in Siberia. In Lubyanka, potentially, but just awful. You think your life is fucking shitty? You went to Auschwitz, now we're going to the fucking Gulag for another 10. Here's a quick 10. So like I said, they just hand these things out, and it would always be for nothing much. That's what everyone would say. Nothing much. What are you in for? Nothing much. Fucking told my buddy the fucking government stinks. You know, sold a piece of bread to some fucking Jew or whatever. Who knows, man? Like, the shit was wild because this was anti-religion, anti-everything. Like, anyone, like, basically, like, the people that like, you know, you kind of wonder, like, oh, I wonder who would be actually sent to here, because you never think, like, oh, it's not going to be me. It's going to be, like, criminals. It's going to be, you know, people who are doing bad things. Perhaps, you know, maybe they are doing something, but do they deserve to be tortured and killed, basically, strung along, malnourished, and slowly wasted away into the state? But a lot of examples of people that were sent there from the 20s through the 50s were, you know, members or former members of any non-Bolshevik political parties, peasant hostages, students and intellectuals, members of churches, clergy, Russians returning from abroad, nationalists and ethnic groups, nationalities and ethnic groups who were resisting or perceived to be resisting the establishment of the Soviet power, former Tsarist state officials. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, you know, it's interesting about the students and intellectuals too, right? Because intelligentsia, the word intelligentsia actually comes from these years in the USSR, and it was used as a pejorative. It was not a good thing. And intelligentsia was a bad word. It was, you know, and this is somewhat unrelated, but that's why kind of there is this perpetuation of the stupid Polish person joke, myth, story, whatever, you know, the dumb Polak joke comes from World War II. They actually took a group of intelligentsia intellectuals from this town called Katyn, took them all into the woods and just shot them in the back of the head. So this goes for a lot of people, you know, almost all Russians that survive that. You know, they say this about Auschwitz and a lot of these places, is that the best people never made it out of those places. The best people gave away their last food. They put themselves in harm's way to save someone. The best people died in there. And that's what's fucking scary, is that the people out of there, you know, have this collective fucking trauma that's real, you know? People fleeing their countries because they're worried about getting killed. I mean, my grandfather's brother, who would have been in his 20s probably at the time, so again, like I said, they're going to arrest you for anything. Like, there's, like, doesn't really matter if they arrest you. You can't be like, oh, this is unlawful. The only thing you can hope for is just you go along with what they're trying to get out of you and try to move past it. But the problem is that these stipulations, I'm not sure exactly which word, but when you have no idea what laws you're breaking, when you have no idea what is going to send you to this place where people are just getting murdered, people are just getting killed, people are just getting worked to death, coming back, even if they do come back, they're a different person. That fear and that anxiety must be crazy. That, like, you know, if my farm is a little bit better than my neighbor's, I'm going to the fucking gulag. And that's what happened to my grandfather's brother. His neighbor got sent to the gulag because they came and they're like, your farm is too nice. It's nicer than everyone else's. What are you doing? Do you have some fucking anti-Russian sentiments? Whatever, sent him. And then my grandfather's brother killed himself. He fucking killed himself because of the fear. And that's the thing, is that you don't even have to go to the fucking gulag to then get affected by this, right? Like, you're getting fucking murked, you're killing yourself, and you're not even letting them get their hands on you. And that's the thing, right? These people were so desperate, they got to such a fucking state where anything, you know, anything was better than going to this fucking gulag and being treated by these people. You know, even sending things back, like, they're just going to fucking rifle through it. And they never thought about sending back money. Like, my family was like, if you're going to send any gifts back, don't fucking send money. I mean, the Gulag stuff stopped in the 50s, but like, still, the Soviet Union didn't fall till the late 80s, right? 89 or something like that. 91, I guess, is when Lithuania was liberated. But if you ever wanted to send anything back, you know, you sewed an old shitty jacket inside, or sewed the nice shirt or the nice coat inside an old shitty jacket, because you know the fucking Russians are going to open it and fucking rifle through it. And that's just the smallest little inconvenience, right? But like, nothing was yours, right? Nothing belonged to you. And that was the craziest thing about when you take so much away from people. You know, their families are dead, you know, they have no home to go back to. They talked about it, and so Solzhenitsyn talks about this. He talks about the lonely prisoner. And the lonely prisoner sounds awful. But what it is kind of someone who's like become enlightened. They've let go of all worldly attachments. I mean, maybe let go isn't necessarily the proper vernacular. All their worldly attachments have been ripped away from them. But they walk around like they have this like angelic glow, head slightly held high, even though that's not allowed. Just there's something that, you know, you can't really do anything. You can kill them, but that would probably be a sweet relief, right? And that's the fucking scariest thing about all this shit, right? Like, is that it's so bleak and it's so dark. And, you know, the first time I heard about this book was through Jordan Peterson. And I mean, you know, he's obviously extremely controversial character. But the problem is that he brings this book up in a light that it doesn't necessarily follow kind of all of his, like, it's a great starting point for kind of where Jordan Peterson starts to kind of overinflate and kind of go a little bit off the rails. There are kernels, there are nuggets to his information, to his ideas and his truth that do have validity, right? And I mean, one of his things is that communism sounds great, but just read the Gulag Archipelago and you'll know what can happen when communism goes off the rails. It's just everyone becomes a number. Nothing matters anymore. Like I mentioned before, everything's based on fear. Everything's based on just making sure the guy above you is happy, and you just keep rolling. Chernobyl might have been fucking caused by someone just trying to avoid getting sent to the gulag because they knew, or not sent to the gulag, but like going to prison or killed. I mean, they weren't doing straight up gulag shits, but they were still like poisoning and killing people. It's probably time for another podcast, but this dude, I think I might have talked about it, the Russian woodpecker. Anyway, they tried to create this giant array that could see over the horizon, this radar array that could see over the horizon for nuclear weapons from the US. And it like didn't work for years and years. And like one of the days they were about to test it, Chernobyl happened, like the meltdown. So they think that potentially, if you've ever seen the show Chernobyl, you can they start the show with like moments before the reactor meltdown, and there's like this like unknown Russian bureaucrat that's like, we have to do the test. Like he's pushing for this test to be done. And then the reactor happens, so they think potentially that bureaucrat was this dude who was overseeing the Russian woodpecker that was going to fail, and he knew his goose was cooked, so he created the world's biggest distraction chicken of all time. So say what you will about that, but again, this is where communism is going to drive people. The fucking razor's edge for mistakes is so small. You do something wrong, even if you didn't do anything wrong, they're the ones that are deciding whether you're going to live or die, whether you're going to be free, whether you're going to see the fucking sun ever again. So be careful with your ideas. Don't be extreme. Everything in moderation, including moderation. Try to find the middle. The extremes exist so that we know about the fucking edges of the road. We know where the sidelines are. We got to know where the sidelines are so that we can play in the middle. But to live on the edge and live on the sidelines, you're liable to fucking go off the whole trail and no one's working together anymore. So if we want to make this fucking shit work, if we want to make this goddamn society, this democracy, whatever you want to call it work, without us having to wipe the fucking Monopoly board clean and start all over again, however that may be, think about this shit. Think about how bad it could be. Think about that. We're doing pretty well. 95% of the stuff is pretty fucking good. Yeah, there's 5% of the shit that ain't great. But we're making moves. We're trying to do things better. We got to keep thinking about each other. Can't be afraid of each other. We lived through years and years now of this COVID shit where we're scared of each other 6 feet away from everybody. It's over. We're all in this together. We are all one. There is no separation. I am you and you are me. We are reflections of ourselves. And that's the only way we can move to the next level and get away from all this fucking petty ass bullshit. And this goddamn fucking politicking and all this whack shit. Anyway, that's all I got in the tank, y'all. Thank y'all for listening to me, although I fucking sound like a fucking whacked out Jordan Peterson. I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. I want to hear what everyone's thinking about this shit. If you've read the book, if not, hit me up. We'll talk about it. Love y'all. We'll see you soon. Peace.